Welcome to the Tom Nash Report, and today we have a litany of topics to cover, mainly the ceasefire between Iran and the Israelis, also what happens next, and most importantly, at the end of the video, I'll give you my analysis as to the possibility of a regime change in Iran following what went on for the past 2 weeks. A lot to cover in today's video. Don't click nothing, don't smash nothing, don't buy nothing. Listen. So first and foremost, we had Trump go on social media, his preferred way of delivering his announcements, and basically tell everybody, hey, it's over. The war is over. We got a ceasefire between the Israelis and the Iranians. They both agreed. May there be peace. Now, obviously, we had a breach, as always in the Middle East. We had, in fact, 2 breaches. We had the first breach happen literally 10 minutes after the deadline, which was midnight Eastern Standard Time. Iranians shot a salvo at southern Israel, killing multiple people, in fact causing a lot of damage. The Israelis then had to absorb another breach about 3 or 4 hours after the deadline, again with the Iranian regime sending 2 more rockets that were shut down. But that basically sparked a whole thing in Israel where basically people started saying, look, we took one. There's no way we're going to ignore 2 breaches. We have to respond. People got killed today, and then they did it again. Let's go hard. And we had a bunch of politicians locally from Israel basically saying, we're going to go ham on Iran for doing that. And then Donald Trump woke up and he basically leaned on Israel, according to mainstream media. I'll tell you what exactly happened in real life, not in storyland. And he basically says, no. Stop it. Nobody's retaliating. We're keeping the ceasefire. And basically, the story is now finished, as it says right now, for now, because we are talking about the Middle East after all. So everything I'm going to tell you today is basically for now. It's the caveat. So this is kind of the general recap of what happened while you were sleeping, but the plot thickens, and there's a lot of thickening to talk about. So check this out. Okay. So first and foremost, I'm always into giving you the bottom line first, ahead of the analysis, ahead of all the heavy lifting. The analysis is important, I get it, but if you're just here to kind of hear the bottom line, here are the winners, losers, and what happens next, okay? So, number 1, obviously, the winner circle here includes a lot of countries, some of them completely benefiting from doing absolutely diddly squat, right? Obviously, Turkey wins by just being there. They took Syria, and they saw 2 countries which they cannot stand go at each other, exchanging blows. The Turks hate the Iranians. The Turks hate the Israelis. They basically said, good luck, both of you. Fuck each other up. And they enjoy that. Chef's kiss for the Turks. And they actually, by weakening Iran, because of the latest thing that happened in this 2-week war, essentially their stronghold over most of Syria now becomes even more powerful. Especially since they got a deal going on where the Israelis keep 10, 20%, they get to keep 80%. Basically, it's a sweet deal. So the Turks basically benefit by doing nothing. Now, then we have the Saudis. Now, the Saudis benefit because they managed not to piss off Iran, not to take part in any of this mess, not to get bombed. Nobody bombed the Aramco facilities at all. They mainly stayed out of this. And yet, now, having seen what the Israelis, with the support of the United States, are able to do in the region, and mainly how they were able to get a stranglehold on Iran, the Saudi-Israeli deal is basically now a 100% certainty. But that is really, really good for the Saudis because they will finally have something to lean on as a regional defense pact against the Iranian crazies. Because Saudi and Iran really cannot stand each other, and the Saudis are basically with their underwear. There's no protection unless they get the US and the Israelis to back them up. So it's a win for Saudi. They got out of this without getting involved, and they're getting to sign a deal with the Israelis and the US for a new economic corridor, which is going to make a lot of money for everybody involved, and a new regional defense alliance. Beautiful. Also, obviously the Israelis win. I'll talk about it extensively. There's so many wins for the Israelis here. The list is about 13 items long. A lot to talk about. The US wins because they get to show strength in the Middle East, which is something they haven't done in the previous administration at all. So they get to basically restore deterrence, show force, show the entire world that the alliance between them and the Israelis is as strong as ever, literally what Donald Trump said, and put Iran in its place, bitch slap Iran without putting boots on the ground, and with one bombing, which they kind of had to do, but basically let the Israelis do all the heavy lifting. And now Trump gets to be finally the peacemaker that he campaigned on, bringing peace and basically getting this whole thing under the lid. Okay? So those are the winners. The losers here basically are Iran first and foremost. Iran got hit hard over the past 2 weeks. I know some of you may have seen the footage coming out of the Israeli city centers that got hit by Iranian ballistic missiles, and the destruction is ginormous. There's no doubt about it. But with the exception of a hospital, a refinery that got damaged, and one research center for cancer, basically, those are the only facilities which the Iranians managed to hit, and everything else was civilian casualties par excellence. Basically, the only thing they've managed to hit is civilians, apartments, kill people, and damage a refinery, ruin the research center for cancer, and destroy partially a hospital in the south of Israel. Nothing strategic was achieved by Iran in this war except killing a lot of people, which is a horrendous thing. But if you're talking strategy, Iranian actions did not weaken in any way, shape, or form the Israelis. They've caused them a lot of pain on the national level, but they haven't hit an airfield, a military base, some sort of strategic facilities. And on top of it, they have a can of worms that was open right now domestically, because what happened over the past 2 weeks with Israel exchanging blows and essentially punching up and beating up Iran, the internal issues that Iran is dealing with the minorities, with the regime opposition, with all this crap they're trying to keep a lid on, this has awakened these forces, and now Iran has to crack down on all of this mess to try and keep the regime intact. So they have a lot on their plate right now. They're basically in survival mode internally right now. Qatar is basically a huge loser here because everybody saw, number one, that Qatar and Iran collaborated on the Iranian retaliation strike on the United States. Qatar has been exposed as the only real ally of Iran in this game because Russia and China, not really allies. They said the right things, but they haven't helped the Iranians in any way, shape, or form in this war. In fact, you could see that Russia and China are taking a distance away, saying, hey, whoever wins will work with you. China even more than Russia. But the Qataris have exposed themselves as the promoters of Iran in the region. But now that Iran is severely weakened, that alliance is not that valuable. And now Qatar is stuck kind of with this lame duck. And now we're getting to the third part. What's next? And that is option one. I call it option one because in my previous video, I gave you 3 options of a possible scenario how this war is going to end. And scenario number 1 was peace through pain. Okay? This thing, quite simple, is this. The US, Iran, and the Israelis all claim victories. Iran gets to say we survived the onslaught of America and the Israelis. We're still standing. We fired till the last second. We caused so much damage. We killed so many Israelis. Doesn't matter to the citizens, right? The United States gets to say, hey, we actually showed force in the Middle East for the longest time. We haven't done so. We strengthened Israel in the region. We strengthened the Saudis in the regions. And we weakened Iran in the region. And all of this without boots on the ground. Chef's kiss, right? And the Israelis, they have a list of achievements, obviously, to show for, but everything they've done was a strategic success. Perhaps with the exception of not toppling the regime, but I'm not sure this was the actual goal here. But basically, they can claim a lot of success, and I'll talk about it in a second, starting from taking out the entire chain of command of the Iranian forces, all the way to taking out the air defenses, slowing down the ballistic missile program, the nuclear program. There's a lot of wins for the Israelis. I'll talk about it in a second, but everybody can declare a win. And even though nobody won 100% here, everybody gets to go home and fight another day. Even though it's painful to do so, nobody's happy, but this is the compromise, so to speak, okay? So let's take a step back and kind of walk through what happened over the past 2 weeks, because I think a lot of people misunderstand how this thing played out. Now, this was not some sort of a rogue mission by the Israelis, which was carried out on a whim by Benjamin Netanyahu, right? I know it sounds like this because this is what the Trump administration did. They basically said, look, folks, let's send the Israelis first, right? They don't need a lot from us to go and shellac Iran. They're literally on the brink of doing that. They've been waiting for 20 years to do that. All we have to do is not object. If we don't object, they go in. If they fail, we get to say we had nothing to do with this crazy mess. That's the Israelis, right? If they succeed, then we can jump in and participate in the credit. I call it Trump in balls deep. And that's exactly what happened. The Israeli operation was an astounding success, which basically allowed Trump to jump into the pool and say, yes, I am a part of this. This whole thing was a deception campaign, etc., 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 right? Now, what Trump did, he could have closed this thing in 48 hours, 48, 72 hours tops. But what he's done, he allowed the Israelis about a week and a half to clean up everything that needs to be cleaned up, starting from the air defenses, all the way to the launch sites, to the launchers, to the missiles, to the storage facilities, to the entire manufacturing process of the ballistic missiles, to a big part of the nuclear program, IRGC, a lot of facilities, a lot of resources. Basically, Israel worked through a list of strategic damage that they've caused to the Iranians on the full direction of the United States. And that worked to perfection. And once the Israelis basically exhausted their list of targets, as it was provided by the US, like some sort of a grocery list that you give to your husband. I take one for my wife every week, right? Then the husband, the Israel in this case, comes back and says, look, I've done my part. I've done all this grocery list. What's now? Well, at this point, basically the only grocery that was left is the Fordo, the big, massive bunker inside of a mountain, the James Bond of all James Bond finales, right? So basically at this point, Trump says, I got it. I'm the only one who can do this. Our B-2 fighters, fighter jets, bombers, whatever they are, we're going to drop a gazillion tons of explosive and we're going to get it done. And he does that, right? He does that. He drops the bomb, but he has no interest in actually going for a full-fledged war, boots on the ground, definitely not. His MAGA base is deeply penetrated with Qatari money, let's put it this way, and they've been campaigning against him to do so, so he has no political support to go full balls deep into the war here. So he knows he has a very limited way of doing this, so he goes pinpoint, not to stir shit up, right? And he does this pinpoint strike on Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, right? The three sites. And then he coordinates, with the Qataris' help, an acceptable response from the Iranians to this horrible strike in which the Iranians bomb a bunch of empty bases and all these rockets get shut down because it was telegraphed well in advance, and basically the whole theater leads to a bunch of nothing. Right after that, we have the announcement of the peace deal that was achieved literally a day after, basically Trump saying, look, it's finished. Both sides get to go home. This is done. We're going to have peace through pain. Now, at this point, this is where the fuckery started happening. Because the Iranians, they had to have the last shot, which means they had to be firing until 11:59 p.m. And what happened is, either intentionally or not intentionally, they both were late and they did it too loud, too strong, and they've managed to hit a residential building, killing a bunch of people, which was horrendous. A way for the Iranians to almost blow up this deal. Now, the Israelis basically ignore that. And they take it and they say, the ceasefire is intact. We're going for the ceasefire. 3 or 4 hours later, Iran shoots another 2 missiles out of the blue for no reason. Those get shut down, but at this point, this was too much. And Israeli officials basically come out and they're saying, we're going to go ham on Iran. They wait for Trump to wake up, then they send the planes, and then Trump does this little act where he curses on live TV saying, oh, these guys don't know what the fuck they're doing. And then he calls Benjamin Netanyahu, and he basically says, no, Bibi, you cannot do it. And then the Israelis bomb some sort of a radar, and they fly back home. And this whole theater is sold to people as if Trump is the peacemaker, he's the strong one, he stopped the Israelis from doing this crap, and Benjamin Netanyahu can say back home, look, I wanted to bomb the shit out of Iran, but Trump stopped me, I couldn't do it, to hell, oh, shucks. And the peace deal gets to remain. And I'll show you in a second why all parties here have a vested interest in this peace deal not falling apart. So let's start with Donald Trump and the United States. Why does the US want the ceasefire to sustain? Well, number one, the nukes are either gone or severely damaged. At the very least, the US have put a huge X on the nuclear program of the Iranian regime, setting it back at least 5 to 10 years. Number one. Number two, they've shown regional dominance. They've made their point of not putting boots on the ground for their own base. Nobody in MAGA is angry about that. Everybody's apologizing to Trump. And no harm to US bases in the region. Everything stays intact. And because they bring up the Israelis in this, and they make them look a lot stronger, then the Saudi-Israel deal is back on the table after being sidelined for about 2 years. Now, on the Iranian side, there's also a lot of logic on letting this deal play out. Number one, we're talking about survival. This regime is on the brink of collapse, either by external or internal forces. They have a lot of spinning plates right now. And by walking away from this conflict alive, they get to go ham on their own population, stop this little thing that's going on, and survive to fight another day. They did kill a lot of Israelis, and they did cause a lot of damage that is really imagery efficient for them, for their own propaganda back home to see, look folks, we've killed all these people, we ruined all these buildings, look at how much we hurt the Israelis, etc., etc. Their own base needs to see all this damage, all this killing, for them to say, hey, you guys are not pussies, right? So Iran gets to save face somewhat, very limited save of face. Now, as far as the Israelis, why would the Israelis want to stop now? Now, I don't think they're being pressured by Trump to do so. I think they have so much success and they really have no more upside left to continue this war. Allow me to explain. The only thing that the Israelis have not yet achieved in this war is the change of regime in Iran, right? They haven't done that. I don't think it's possible from this point on for the Israelis to do it alone without the US. And Trump is not interested in putting boots on the ground, which means that this whole thing, regime change, doesn't happen. Without US support, it cannot happen. The Israelis know they cannot get this. It's not going to happen without the US support. But what they already got, eliminated all the chain of command of Iran. Air defenses, gone. Damage ballistic missile program. Establish regional dominance. Move away from the PR mess that Gaza was and punching up and winning against a much bigger force, 80 times their size, right? Showing they're the bully in the neighborhood. Saudi deal, back on the table. We have the US-Israel relationship, never been stronger. It's a show of force to the world. Hey, if you thought the whole Biden thing, that thing is over. Trump is with us, right? We have defense sales going to go through the roof. The Israeli air defenses have shown massive success against these ballistic missiles, right? That thing is going to make the Israelis hundreds of billions of dollars in air defense sales. The stock market in Israel right now is at all-time highs. Basically, the economy is popping. There's no disaster that happened on the battlefield. No lost planes, no accidental bombings of a school. Nothing tragic happened on the battlefield that makes the Israelis look bad yet. And no strategic hits by Iran in Israel. Basically means no more upside. If you've got no more upside and you've got an off-ramp, you take it because this is a basketball game. You're basically winning by 30 points and the game is about to end, you take it. There's no point in prolonging the game when you're up 30 points, okay? It's like saying, well, we'd like to play in overtime even though we're leading 30 points. That's stupid, right? So the interest of everybody here is to end this thing, right? Now, the Iranians almost fucked it up. with their breaches. I mean, it was a stupid thing to do. The one that they've done late and killed a bunch of people. The one they did hours after the ceasefire. Israelis have diffused this by threatening, by posturing, and then pretending as if Trump stopped them. Complete theater. But now the big question is, what's next, right? What's next? Let's talk about it. So next up, we have a few options here, okay? Fragile peace. We've got Iranian internal stability. Basically, Iran kind of resumes the control they have over their own people through force by cracking down on their own population. We have the US controlling the region, remote controlled by Israel and the Saudis through the whole Abraham Accords. The US would love to leave the Middle East as much as possible and to control it remotely by two superpowers like the Saudis and the Israelis. And we've got the Israelis getting the Saudi deal, creating a new economic corridor and making a lot of oil money. A lot of oil money. This is the most probable option. This is a 60%, maybe probably more at this point. Very, very likely that this is what's going to happen. Now, we've got, of course, option number 2, which is a little bit less likely, about 30%, which is continued tensions, no direct conflict. We have the Houthi rebels potentially causing some trouble in the Bab el-Mandab. We've got Iraqi militia in Syria possibly trying to destabilize Jordan, Syria, a lot of crap, guerrilla stuff. Maybe destabilizing Jordan, maybe destabilizing Syria, reestablishing potential presence in Syria by Iran. All this thing might happen. And we have, of course, the Hezbollah. The big question, will they remain what they are today, which is pretty much a political party in Lebanon, or they step up again and they start causing damage on the Israelis, right? I would put it at 30% because Hezbollah is pretty much finished. Jordan has been proven to be a lot more stable than people thought. Syria is owned by Turkey. Turkey is not going to have it. Houthis they've made a business decision to stay out of this. And I think this is very unlikely, okay? There's, of course, a third option, which is a complete restart of the war, which I think is the most, probably 10%. Of course, never say never because this is the Middle East, but nobody wants it. That's what I'm basing my estimate is. If nobody wants it, the chances are very, very low, right? Look, as you know, in the Middle East, anything can flip 180 degrees in a minute. So I'm not going to say never, but this is highly unlikely. Now, let's go to the next stage. How likely is a regime change in Iran following this war? Obviously, we're going to see a weaker regime because of what happened. The Israelis have caused a lot of damage to the IRGC, to the Iranian regime, to the Basij, to prisons, etc., etc., etc. So we have a few options. We got a window here for minorities, such as the Baluchis or the Kurds, potentially to start shit up. Unlikely because they're very, very, very far away. They haven't shown any interest in causing any issues. They want to be a part of Iran. They're not separatists. At best, they can claim some sort of an autonomy, but they're not going to overthrow the government on their own. We have obviously the possible scenario of the secular students, workers, pushing on the regime, like in '79 with the students. Unlikely because the Basij has been mobilized. They're at every square right now, literally shooting on sight if you look the wrong way. Forget starting a protest. We have potentially an internal power struggle inside the regime that may cause a chaotic response that may collapse this whole thing. Maybe some sort of an inheritance battle over who gets to inherit Khamenei, right? And of course, we have option 4, which is 1 and 3 combined. All of this might happen at the same time, giving us the perfect storm. What is the likelihood of this thing happening? Okay, I'm sorry to kind of be the party pooper here. Not very likely short term, okay? Short term, I think that we're going to see a lot of crackdowns by the Iranian regime. Now, those, of course, might backfire, and we might see that violence translated to a bigger protest, right? It may awaken the beast, but given the current makeup of Iran, this regime holds all the resources, all the power. It's going to be very, very hard, right? Of course, there's a chance we're going to see unrest, but an actual regime change, I'm sorry, short term, probably not. Long term is a whole different enchilada. Allow me to explain. Long term, we have something that started, which is basically unstoppable, right? So Iran is heading down the path of the regime collapsing, no doubt. Probably going to take 5 to 10 years, but what we have right now is that Iran spent all of its money on building up proxies that have been eliminated. They're gone. Lots and lots of money spent on this. Lots and lots of money spent on ballistic missiles that they have to replenish. Now, not only they've lost the money building them, they haven't really done a lot of strategic damage, and now they have to replenish them. What about the nuclear project that they want to rebuild, and they promise they will rebuild? That's more money they have to spend into this crap, not going into their economy. They have sanctions, which will be also crippling for the next 10 years. And we have regional isolation with the Gulf countries going towards Israel versus Iran, and the Abraham Accords and so forth. And Qatar probably will try and distance himself from this. And Russia and China basically gave them the cold shoulder and this war. So in the 5 to 10 year period, it is possible, but it's going to depend on how much support this opposition gets from Western powers. Without Western push, without Western support, it's going to be very, very hard. But for that support and that push to come, we'll need all of these to play out. So we're going to have to see how this thing plays out. And if you want to be a supporter of this channel, this is a very important project to me. And if you find it useful, join our Patreon at patreon.com/Tom Nash Report. You'll get access to articles, to work that I do just on Patreon for you guys. And also you'll be supporting the channel. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.